It's my pleasure to host this webinar today. So the most talking will be done obviously by Katharina and Bastian. I'm leading the mid-market sales team here at Nilo. So that's basically all that I'm doing, overlooking our sales outreach campaigns. And we are obviously a lot in contact with customers. So this topic for me is also very important because I'm a team lead. The topic today is preventing burnout and promoting remote team well-being, which I personally have been affected as well over the past years in leading teams and being in teams. So it's a very important topic, obviously. And we have two great participants in this panel. First one is Dr. Katharina Koch. Katharina leads everything surrounding psychologists and psychology at Nilo. She'll have a couple of minutes to introduce herself a little bit more in detail. And then we have Bastian with us today. Thanks for joining this talk as well. Bastian is the VP Product and Marketing at Workmotion, and he is focused, has a vast background in B2B, and has also a focus on dynamic teams. And obviously this whole topic of future of work is something that's very close to his heart. So let me pass it over to Katharina and Bastian to further introduce yourselves to all the participants today.
Thank you, Yannick, and welcome everyone to this fireside chat. I'm Dr. Katharina Koch. I'm the head of psychology at Nilo, and I'm a clinical psychologist myself. I'm certified in cognitive behavioral therapy, and I've worked many years with patients, also on the topic of burnout. Often that goes along with depression, anxiety. So yeah, I know the topic from that context as well. I'm also a PhD in neuroscience and psychology and did a lot of research in the field of mood disorders. And I'm also leading our scientific work now at Nilo. Passing on to Bastian.
Amazing. Thanks, Katharina. Yeah, welcome, and really glad I can be here today. I'm 39 years old, and I have led teams in different settings. I started working in a big corporate, typical German Mittelstand. I went to the startup scene. I managed teams in the office, and now I'm working fully remote team at Workmotion. So I've seen many different things. Now, I wouldn't exchange, I can already tell you, this remote work for anything. This is by far my most preferred setup by now, but I also had to learn on how to do this in the right way. And we at Workmotion, we are experts on this. Our employees, they are distributed across more than 40 different countries, and we are a remote first company. No one has the obligation to go to the office. We operate 3 small offices in hubs where we see a lot of employees living, but it's an option to go there. No one asks you to do this. And yeah, I enjoy that a lot, working in this kind of setup. And it's also a setup we help our customers work with. So we at Workmotion, if you don't know us, we help companies to hire remotely across the whole globe. So if you, for example, based on or caused by the labor shortage, have troubles filling a position with people maybe in Germany or the country you're operating in, and you have this perfect candidate in Spain or any other country in the world you want to hire, you don't have an entity, you don't know how to hire this person, you come to us, we can enable you to do that. Also to maybe prevent that an employee who wants to move abroad cannot be employed any longer by you. Very typical what we see. We help with that, because with us, you can hire around the whole globe. And yeah, I'm very happy to share today some personal experience also on mental health well-being. It's a topic that's very important for me. I think it's very important to look at also in a remote setup. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Katharina and Bastian. It's super interesting for me as well, because all those topics that Bastian has stressed at the moment as well. I mean, we at Nilo, we obviously focus on offering solutions on mental well-being and mental health issues. But at the same time, like, we are in teams as well, and we have to deal with all those issues as well. Obviously, we can use our own solution, but it's interesting to hear that different perspectives on how to deal with this as well, especially as we see like anxiety, stress, depression, like topics that are on the rise and are very much anchored in companies as well. Maybe for today, to kick it off, to everyone that is now participating, again, a warm welcome to the ones that have joined over the introduction of the panelists. You can use the Q&A at the bottom of the page to ask questions. If you want to share those questions with everyone directly, you can also use the chat. I'm trying to moderate a little bit in this ongoing discussion. We will have 50 minutes in the end also for Q&A. So I hope that we can get all the questions that you have along the discussion directly answered. To kick this off, I would like to start with a little poll, like a little icebreaker questions. I'm just going to launch that right now. and you will see hopefully the possibility now to answer those two questions, just to get a first understanding also for all of us. And the first question is basically if you ever had a burnout case in your company. And the second one is what's your company work setup like at the moment? Bastian already told us fully remote from their side. For us, it's a hybrid mode at Nilo. It's interesting to see the questions pouring in and the results as well. So I think we have everyone answered now that wanted to participate. You can see the results already, I guess, right?
I can't, but I'm not sure if others can.
No. Maybe it just says. Hi, now. There they are.
Yes,
So I share the results now here. I stopped answering. So I think it's very obviously, right? If you look at the first question, that many people actually, more than half of the people have had a burnout case in the company already. So maybe this is also like a good Kickstarter for the discussion, Katharina and Bastian, for basically maybe starting with the status quo of stress and burnout cases that we have seen here in this first poll as well, especially in remote work setups. So like, what are the risks that those setups entail, and for employees, what do they face with this kind of setups?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Super interesting to see the responses here. So over 50% actually had a case of burnout in their companies, and a high number also, maybe not burnout, but high levels of stress. And that's exactly what we see in our society, that levels of burnout, levels of stress are rising and have been rising over the past years. And the same goes for stress, for depression and anxiety. We see about 2/3 of our society now coping with some level of mental health distress, some level of challenges. And that's not always a disorder. Actually, burnout itself isn't classified as recognized as a disorder. It's recognized as a syndrome. However, it's not really a disorder that is measurable, but depression and anxiety are. And stress is, I've seen a study lately, almost 80% of individuals actually experience high levels of stress. That's a lot. And stress itself isn't a problem, right? Stress is a problem when it doesn't stop, when it's becoming chronic, and when you don't get breaks from it. But yeah, those numbers are definitely high, and they are going up. So an important topic to tackle and to talk about solutions. Exactly.
Bastian, I mean, in those numbers as well, you see when like adding to the points that Katharina just stressed, the setup. You already said that you're fully remote. Most of the participants here in a hybrid work mode. Have you experienced with those numbers, or do you see any parallels to what you have experienced in the past years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have exact numbers on the level of burnout and stress. I think it's hard to measure inside a company, but we try to feel it out from our employees by, for example, doing regular pulse checks with them, which are completely anonymous, where they can just like tell us about also the mental state they're in. It's part of this pulse check, and a very important first sign of that. Putting real numbers on that is hard, but I think important is that it's already being talked about. We will talk later also about like what we do in the companies, and I think like making this a topic alone is already a very good first step.
And like on the part of making it a topic, like why is it? Maybe it's a very easy to answer question, but why should we care at all? Like why is it something that the employer should care about? Because like, I personally hear this in talks as well, that people say, is this something that I as an employer should solve? Should like tackle? Isn't this a personal issue?
Definitely, this is so relevant, right? Like a lot of people see numbers like anxiety and depression are going up. Well, okay, but that's a private issue. However, unfortunately, people that are dealing with mental health challenges, they don't leave them at home, right? Even if they if they maybe can keep them to themselves to a certain degree, you bring your challenges everywhere. And there are many papers and studies that show that you have a direct impact of your mental health on your work. So your productivity is reduced by your mental health challenges, but also sick days go up. A big insurance company in Germany published their new results, and for the first time, the sick leave is mostly related to mental health issues, not physical health. So this is alarming, right? This is something that is changing. But also error and accident rates go up because our concentration isn't the same when we are impacted by mental health challenges. And now imagine, as an employee, I want to be my best self, right? I want to be productive. I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to have to be on sick leave. So I'm getting unsatisfied. And that all can lead to turnover intentions if I don't get the right support. If my company doesn't provide me with tools such as Nilo or other resources. So it's really important to understand that mental health challenges are very present and they impact directly our performance. But this is something we can definitely not neglect as employers. Sorry, both.
Yeah, and especially in a remote setting, the border between work and private life just like dissolves somehow. So how should you keep your problems at home? Like if that's like the view you have as an employer, it's a bit short-sighted.
It's such a big challenge to not have these lines blurred, right? If you work remotely, you really have to make a huge effort and maybe also support your employees and teams doing this effort, making this effort to actually have your personal life. And then there is your work life, right? So if I go into the office physically, I have that commute, I can get into work, I literally step with my body, my brain recognizes I'm at work now, but I also leave work at a certain time. At home, if I work remotely, it's so easy to have dinner behind the laptop. It's so easy to open that up again at night. It's so easy to forget time. So it's harder to take breaks. It's harder to recharge from work, which we really need to perform well. Different challenges.
100%. I think that's one of the challenges that come with remote work. Of course, also this kind of flexibility is at the same time the advantage of remote work. So, but you have to balance that right, and you have to pay close attention as an employer and as a team lead on how this affects your team.
Absolutely.
Maybe Bastian, because you mentioned it in the introduction already, that you have obviously a lot of experience in that from your own company, like in WorkMotion being fully remote. Like what kind of things do you do to mitigate those factors? Like, I mean, I faced those difficulties in especially during Corona times. Like people are not in the office anymore. Like, I mean, we did everything like Zoom and like games where you can meet, and like this whole social isolation factor was a big thing. Maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. Generally, I think there are a lot of things you can and you should do in a remote setup. Not only in a remote setup, but of course, I will always try to bring also this picture from a remote perspective. First thing I would say is, and that's something we do actively at WorkMotion, is talking about this topic. Mental well-being is a topic that should be talked about. If I remember how I started my career, I told you it was more like a big corporate, very traditional Southern German company with like, a different style of leadership also, where you kind of avoided showing weaknesses. I think this was like the general attitude that was lived by everyone there. So you adapted to that. And if I think about my personal experience with stress and pre-burnout symptoms, it took me a while to learn, but I have a migraine that basically is very much connected to the stress levels I'm facing, negative stress levels I'm facing on a constant basis. So whenever I was hit with a migraine in my old office setting, I didn't talk about this. This was like showing some kind of weakness, and the way to handle it was terrible, right? Either try to work through your migraine, which is almost impossible, or go home and invent some story about like why you're going home, and that's not the right thing. At WorkMotion, we talk about this actively. We have, for example, culture community of individual contributors who try to actively work on projects shaping their company culture. And since 1.5 years, one of their main topics is mental well-being. And we had a lot of pilot projects around that. And beginning of the year even led to a decision on a management level to say we have a yearly learning and development budget for our employees, and we changed that at the beginning of this year, making it a learning, development, and mental well-being budget. So each employee has a certain budget they can use based on their choice, also on mental well-being in any kind of way. And I think that's something extremely important to talk about this. But this topic of social isolation, of course, can also not be neglected. You said it, we all experience it during COVID, sitting at home, sitting alone, sitting in front of the screen, having more distance to your team members. And that's something, especially if you work 100% remote, you should counter somehow. We at Work Motion, we save an awesome amount of money by not having offices or just very small and few offices. We reinvest this money in personal meetups. So once or twice a year, we do team meetups. We just today announced our big, this year we have a whole company event. The whole company will meet in Athens in Greece in September for a 4-day company event, which is exactly the thing you have to bring in to help building those personal relationships that cannot be built by not meeting in the office, not having some after work drinks and so on. You rarely have those situations. So you have to actively do something to create those connections between people. It has an incredible effect on mental well-being. You can really see the spirit going up for weeks after such events with every individual team members. And don't keep this like a 1-time or 2-time a year thing. Have constant efforts. We have, for example, a coffee chat lottery where random people of Work Motion, if you sign up, are drawn once per week to 1 or 2 other team members in different teams. It's just like completely by accident, and you have a 15-minute coffee chat with someone. It's very, very important. Also, the way you work with your team directly as a team lead, like in the marketing team, for example, we do a daily stand-up, which I think is important. Just not so much about like being aligned on what's going on. We know the Jira boards, and we try to avoid also to talk too much about, yeah, I'm doing this and this and that, but also spice it up with like more interesting topics. So for example, on Tuesdays this morning, we always talk about what inspires us in the world of marketing. What ad did we see that maybe is like something we just want to exchange about and like, find new ideas on and just talk about this. And on Thursdays, we do a round of what made you happy this week. What success did you celebrate? What put a smile on your face? And those little things, they all contribute. You have to do a constant effort because you have to be aware that this kind of like isolation can happen. But I made very good experience with having such kind of ways. We do a lot of other things as well. I can share more experience if you're interested. Just send me a LinkedIn message. But yeah, I think that really, really helps.
Thanks so much, Bastian. I mean, that there have been a couple of good ideas for feel-good measures that can be taken also in this fully remote setup. Katharina, I've seen a question come in, and I think I'm going to ask another one first and then go back to their questions, because what Bastian also explains, like having people in a remote setup is more difficult to really get a grasp on what's going on with those people. And he mentioned a couple of things that you can do in order to get a better understanding how someone is doing. But maybe you can tell us a bit of early warning signs, because that's super difficult in a remote setup. Early warning signs of challenges that ultimately might lead to burnout.
Yeah, definitely. Super good insights, Bastian. Thanks for all those tips, because they really tackle those challenges of social isolation, I think, that remote work can bring. So for early warning signs, when it comes to mental health challenges, you want to look out for a sudden change in behavior. And some of those changes you will see no matter if it's physically in person or if it's remotely. But some are definitely more challenging to spot. Generally, think of a change in concentration. That could be an indicator. Being late all of a sudden for meetings all the time, more absences, sick days, more mistakes, more errors. But then it comes to social behavior, right? And that's harder to spot. So social withdrawal is a very common indicator for mental health challenges. Also social behavior. So typically people that are mentally healthy challenged are more edgy in their responses. So that could be also an indicator. And those things are maybe not so easy to spot remotely. What I've learned as a psychotherapist when I worked digitally with patients, so actually doing psychotherapy with patients digitally, I worked a lot with body cues. but they were gone, right? I could see the face, but I couldn't see the whole body speaking to me. So I had to learn that I had to really ask about experiences. What's going on there? How do you react to this? How do you feel about this? And that's maybe something you have to really realize at some point. I have to really ask what is going on. So what I would definitely want to emphasize, and what Bastian just mentioned, is these pulse checks. Like literally ask once a week, where's your stress level at? And give a scale from 1 to 10. That makes it much easier for somebody to actually give an answer to that. Because if I'm just asked, how are you doing? Probably just get an okay. But if I give a very specific question, I get a much better answer, much more detailed answer that gives me more information. So that's a very important thing. Pulse checks, temperature checks in the teams as well. Once a week, once a month, I would make that a regular habit as a team lead. And so you can actually spot those warning signs, even if they're not so obvious or easy to spot when it's a remote setup.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I like that. Our pulse check usually are twice a year for the whole company, and then we really get a big picture. But yeah, this constant interaction, asking, like that's exactly right. Ask how people are doing. And what you said about communication and like this limits that we face, a large part of our communication comes through our body, through our tone of voice. We always encourage everyone to turn on their cameras. Having the camera turn off takes so much away from communication. So we try to really counter that and just make it mandatory. Of course, like if I have my little kids jumping around, I can also turn off my camera for a while. That's fine. But usually try to open up your camera. Because you can get cues from that as well. And communication in general, I think, is a topic that should be looked at. In a remote setting, for example, we live as much as we can async work. It's one of the big benefits of remote work. I think one of the traps in an office setting that can easily lead also to like some mental overload is like this trap of like having meetings for everything. And it's so easy, right? It's just like, hey, let's meet up, let's come together, we do a meeting. And this costs a lot of energy. Like you have to stop, like you stop working on what you're currently working. You have to go to this meeting, think about different. Afterwards, again, go back to the topic you worked on, put a lot of energy into going back into this topic. And unfortunately, lots of meetings are afterwards completely not worth it. If you then do a retrospective, was it worth going to this meeting, investing this energy? No, it wasn't. And in a remote setup, I think it's a little bit easier. We try to encourage this also very actively to say, if this is a pure information sharing, don't have a meeting. There shouldn't be a meeting because of that. You can record a Loom, a Vidyard, whatever, share it with people. They can watch it whenever they want, whenever it suits their focused work that they're doing. And then they can leave comments in a Slack thread, for example. But I think that's a very good, very typical thing that we see, that meetings can also lead to like a lot of additional stress. And we try to avoid that. Rather, we do the meetings like I described to you, rather have a meeting where we discuss stuff around like just what we have seen, what we are happy about, have these kind of meetings or brainstorming meetings where it's really like a lot of energy also creating among team members than information sharing meetings. Those we try to completely cancel. And if I recently took over the marketing team before I had the product team, like the first thing I do is look at the calendar of my team members and radically cross out meetings that are unnecessary if I see them.
Super important topic. I think that's something that I will take with me today as well. Too many meetings that we don't need. Thank you so much, Bastian. I mean, Katharina shared an example, and I'm looking at the time. There's like 3 questions that we have lined up. We have enough time for them in a while. Katharina explained a little bit of changes in doing psychotherapy, and when we loop back a little bit to the leadership and responsibilities of leadership. Maybe this is something that we can touch with both of you and your experience. Like, what is there actually? What's the responsibility of leadership in all of this and preventing it in those setups? And maybe also where does it stop? Because that's for me also still a difficult thing. Right? I mean, we are super open with it, but still there's like, how much should I be involved in those topics myself?
I think this is such a relevant topic to talk about, and I'm glad that you're bringing it up now. Before we're done with our fireside chat here, but leadership, in our opinion, has the responsibility to create a positive work environment, to try and be aware of early warning signs, and then to react to those, an intervention, but mostly to be empathic towards the team. And I think this is also where it ends. You cannot put too much pressure on leadership in the sense of you're an expert now of mental health and you are in charge of everything. However, there's so much you can do. As leads, you have the largest leverage for your team health. I think team leads have been shown to have a greater impact on the mental health of their teams than even the psychotherapist. So it's something to take serious. And there are little things you can do that have huge impact. We talked already with Bastian about culture. So an open feedback culture where we can talk about things like mental health are massive to decrease stress. Flexibility, what Bastian also brought up, massive to decrease stress. And everything that decreases stress improves our mental health. But then the biggest one, I think, as a lead, you're a role model. So if you respect, for example, work-life balance and don't send these emails at 9 p.m. because that's a signal I'm working, you're supposed to work. Even if you don't want to signal that, you are signaling that. So it's really important to be that role model and show how it's done. If you feel comfortable, even talk about mental health, but even just to bring up outside of work, there is another life. And that's important. You need to recharge your batteries outside of work to come back full of energy and perform well. That's important to me. And I hope that's important to everyone here in the team. So I think those are really very, very relevant things that every lead can look at and maybe try and realize in their own teams.
I love those points, and I can only support everything you said, Katharina. And maybe to add another leadership perspective on this, for me, one of the main reasons why people also experience a lot of like negative stress, I always learned this like concept of eustress and de-stress. So if everyone is not aware, eustress more of like this like short-term, rather positive stress that can also lead to a body reaction, basically helping you grow and perform better. For example, right now, I'm in a stress situation. I'm talking in front of a bunch of strangers also about very personal stuff. Of course, this is a stress situation, but it rather fills me with excitement. And I hope my performance in this webinar also shows this. And there, on the other hand, is the de-stress that is like a long-term stress where you cannot get away, the thing that really puts you down, where you wake up in the morning. And that's one of the important signs also for me. Also, what do you think when you wake up in the morning about going to work and you really think, oh no, I feel completely drained out. And this de-stress for me is very often connected to the missing answer of the question of why. Why am I working on what I'm working? Why am I doing the stuff that I'm doing? How do I contribute to the success of this company? How do I influence the customer? These are questions that should be crystal clear to every employee in your company. If that is not the case, do something against it. We at WorkMotion, we have an OKR system in place that we put a lot of time and energy in to really make sure, breaking down from the vision into like a quarterly strategy, we define company level key results that break down to the individual contributors so that everyone can always say, I know how I'm contributing to what the company is doing and why we will be successful. The word of purpose, I think, is a bit overused. That's also like, but like, like I think it goes in this direction of like showing everyone why they spent their 8 hours. And if they do it, and then you will see that that it will lead to situations, and I'm leading product teams also, that like where it's natural to work a bit too much in those teams, but in some instances, because there are just some very, very hard projects where you have to do it, but they put in the energy, and then sometimes they work 10 or 11 hours, and afterwards they say, okay, this wasn't like, this was like a positive experience, of course not constantly, but in a short period of time, and you feel that this feeling of eustress compared to de-stress. And I hope now on the scientific side I didn't say anything that Katharina doesn't approve, but for me that's the experience I have from the practice field.
Actually, this is exactly what we see in science. A little stress can get you a long way. Think of back in high school when you did an exam. You get nervous, that's adrenaline, and that gets you focused. And it's exactly how our bodies works and how it's supposed to work. It's just we have to have breaks from it. We can't keep the stress going. Our body can't. So that's the important message to take with us.
Thank you, Bob, so much. We have, time flies. We have like 12, 13 minutes left, and we want to be like respectful of everyone's time. So there have been a couple of questions pouring in, and I'm starting with the closest one to what we have just discussed about is how we can make sure that no one is forgotten in a remote work setup. As an example, Carl says here that like introverts, for example, that extroverts are always louder and act at, but what about introverts? People not asking for help when they need it.
Yeah, a good point. I think I have also experienced myself having introverts in the teams, and you have to, first of all, train your team leads also on how to bring up such topics to all kind of people, that they know how to do it, and that they, like Katharina, you said it, they actively ask. Yeah, that's like not everyone is natural in doing that. I think I would count me as that as well. I wasn't like that in the past. I had to learn this over time of asking team members how they are doing. So give them like enough training that they know how to approach people in this way, and also give people the like low-key options to say how they are feeling. So maybe this like pulse check or any kind of also anonymous feedback they can give is sometimes helpful. Yeah, maybe they don't want to shout it out. Follow up in one-on-ones if you have the feeling maybe there is something that should be investigated or talked about. Like do it, but do it in a one-on-one setting, of course, and not in like a team round or something.
And I think I want to just quickly add to that, a resource such as Nilo can, of course, be massively supportive here, right? Like if you have the idea that somebody needs a little bit more support and maybe is not the person who wants to speak up about it or wants to share it, then you have that resource that you can point to where you can find support in a very safe setup with experts, with professionals that can support you there.
Thanks so much. We have another question. So like for everyone that hasn't asked any questions, feel still free to add them. If we don't get time right now in this chat, we can also answer them afterwards. There's one more question, like more and more people are interested in becoming mental health first aiders. What could those mental health first aiders and companies do to support people affected by mental health challenges, particularly burnout?
I'm super interested, Bastian, do you work with first aiders in your company?
No.
Okay, no, I'm hearing that a lot lately, that so the concept is that we train specific people in companies and our organizations to learn a little bit more about mental health and be either the person to talk to approach when there is a problem, or also to just advocate for the topic, right, and talk about the topic and share it. And I think it's a great concept. I think there's a lot of people that are interested in learning more about mental health. I mean, this is a topic that is still almost new, right? It's psychology. It's not that old yet, and most of us want to learn about it because it's about how we work, how we think, how we act, how we are as human beings. And it's great that people want to be those people in an organization that people can open up to or approach and ask about. I do think that it should be always a voluntary thing. So if you're not feeling close to the topic, or you're not sure about talking to people, or you don't have the resources to provide them with, that could be a bit tricky. And you don't want to be the person who doesn't have the answer to follow up to a request. So I think the combination, for example, of a platform or a tool like us, but then also mental health aiders who champion for it and who can support and give information resources, that is probably the way to go.
Thanks, Katharina. Two more questions that we have lined up here. One is, with the rise in both stress and burnout, how do we ensure folks have access to validated support and resources? So how do they get validated support and resources? Isn't there a risk of circulating ineffective approaches and also misdiagnosis?
I would always push for an external resource here. I think that we can learn a lot ourselves. Let's say within a company like first aiders, HR, we can learn a lot about signals and signs of burnout and then talk to people. But it's a much more profound way and approach to have a professional resource at hand with experts who are trained years to support a person in that situation. Because what I've learned as a psychotherapist working with patients who had a burnout and developed a depression and came out of it, the biggest challenge is not to do it again, right? So change your life, change your way of looking at life, change your behavior with your teams. That is a really, really big deal, and it takes support, but it's best done with a professional who has been trained to support you in that context.
Yeah, that resonates with me as well as a team lead. I mean, I'm not a therapist, and also it's not my goal as a team lead to optimize the mental health of my team members. The goal of a team is different, and we, like, especially in a remote setting, we do that, but this should be recommended to any company. We try to create a clear focus on outputs and on results, because that's something that also, again, coming back to the reason why employees profit from, if they see like, okay, this is how I come to that outcome. And I rather see the topic of mental health as a side condition we have to talk about, and we have to make sure it's being taken care of, but we are not necessarily as team leads or as a company the ones doing that. We try to enable our employees, for example, with the additional budget that I told you about, that people can spend on their mental well-being. And at the end, it has a lot to do with trust and output focus in order to lead successfully. And that's what I see my responsibility as a team lead. And by that, making sure the right conditions are given also in the field of mental health and mental well-being.
Thanks, Bastian. Yeah, I think that's the external part, always, like you described in the beginning as well, super important for you guys. We have one last question here in the poll. I think that was quite from the beginning, Katharina, when you talked about measuring burnout. And the question is, or the person is interested in understanding why you think burnout is hard to measure. There are some validated scales out there here. The example is Maslow burnout inventory. Is it because there's no clear diagnostic criteria? That's the question.
So what we see, burnout has been a buzzword for like 50 years. It's been coined at some point, and it's perfectly describing a certain situation, right? You have been exposed to chronic stress that you have not been able to manage well, not your fault, but it led to a crazy exhaustion, to distance from your work, maybe even negativism or cynicism to work, and to a low in efficacy, professional efficacy. But we don't have an official diagnosis that's called burnout. We have a recognition in a diagnosis manual for diseases of that syndrome to exist, but we don't have a diagnosis for it. And that makes it hard to measure. What we see is that people have been starting to measure it within certain groups, like professions. And so we can tell that, for example, teachers, medical personnel, really, really high numbers of burnout, but we don't see that, for example, in the field of organizations yet. We don't know the exact number. We can measure stress here, and in one organization you could measure it, of course, with these tools, but it would be very different for each organization. On the other hand, for example, professions that are spending a lot of time outside, moving, like dog walkers have like the lowest numbers of burnout. So you can measure it within certain groups, but it's actually it's really true. Be a dog walker, it's perfect. But it's really hard to say, for example, for this size of organization, the numbers of burnout are this or that. That's hard to generalize.
Thank you so much. There was a little side note from Moritz also to the Maslow burnout inventory. Thanks for that. There is no more questions at the moment. I shared some information in the chat as well for networking events coming up in the HR scene. So for everyone that is more interested in that, please join us. We have a last poll that I'm just starting on the side. That's just for you if you want more information. In the end, we're happy to share that. So from my point of view, thank you both so much, Bastian and Katharina. great insights also, some new things for me as well, even though I'm like, at least in the Nilo scene, quite deeply involved. Bastian also like a lot of great insights from your side. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and thanks, Yannick, for hosting. You did a tremendous job. Thanks
Thank
for
you so
making.
much.
I think so too. It was a pleasure, and I learned a lot from you, Katharina, today. Thank